They called him Hellfire in hooves. He was black as ash, shoulders high as a man's chest, and he ran like wind over broken glass. The stallion had no name, only a legend stitched into the whispers of barrooms, auction yards, and horse trailers with dents the shape of regret. No fence could hold him. No man could mount him. They said he was born in a lightning storm on a ridge split by drought, that he'd broken his dam's neck with his first kick and never stopped running since. They said a lot of things. But the truth stood there in a makeshift corral, ringed in rusted pipe and barbed wire, dust swirling like old spirits, the sun flat and unforgiving in a sky that had never known mercy. Around him, the crowd gathered, ranchers, gamblers, boys with mouths full of spit and bravado. Most came for the spectacle. Some came for the money. And one came for silence. She didn't say a word as she leaned against the split fence post, her hat tipped low, boots cracked and scuffed like they'd walked too far in too few years. Her jeans were old, her hands rough. Not in a showy, calloused way, but in the quiet way things get when you've been holding on too long to things that won't be held. A child next to her tugged on his mother's sleeve. That the horse, they said, killed a man? 3, the mother whispered, and near took the eyes out of the 4th. The woman didn't blink. She watched. Inside the corral, the stallion paced like a storm about to remember what it was. His flanks glistened with sweat, his eyes too sharp, too wide. The kind of eyes that looked through you and named every fear you ever thought you'd buried. He didn't trot. He prowled. The announcer's voice cracked over the speakers. $1 million, ladies and gentlemen, to the one who can ride him 5 miles straight. No saddle. No reins. No tricks. Just you, the stallion, and the land. May the best fool win. The laughter that followed was brittle and thin. No one stepped forward. Not yet. The woman's name was June. She hadn't heard it spoken kindly in years. She wore it the way some folks wear scars, quietly, as proof she was still here. And as the stallion screamed into the sky, high, rattling, wild, she remembered a scream just like it, from years ago, in a different pen. One that ended with a boot in the dirt and her father's body not rising after. The land hadn't changed since then. Still dry. Still old. Still heavy with the weight of all it had swallowed. June turned from the fence, walked past the crowd, and toward the entry gate. The murmurs started immediately. Who's she? Where's her rope? She can't be serious. She's just doing it for the money. But no one asked her why. Not really. And if they had, she wouldn't have said. Because it wasn't the $1 million that pulled her toward the beast. It was the song she hadn't sung since her father's voice cracked into silence. It was the memory of a horse named Lark that once listened to her hum and came running like joy. The gate creaked as she stepped inside the corral. The air changed. Thicker now. Like waiting. The stallion didn't charge. Not yet. He turned, full-bodied and fierce, nostrils flaring. His ears flicked back. His tail lashed like a whip slicing time itself. But June didn't flinch. She stood still, hands at her sides, head slightly bowed, not in fear, but in recognition. The sun caught his coat, and for a breath, he looked less like something dangerous and more like something forgotten. A god, maybe. Or a wound. She took one step. Then another. Slow. Measured. Not like she was approaching an animal, but like she was walking into a church she'd long since lost the faith for. Behind her, the world held its breath. The stallion lunged. It was sudden, violent, the way storms break loose from quiet. He charged straight, hooves thundering, neck arched, mouth wide. But June didn't run. She dropped to one knee, as though in prayer, and stopped him. Not with a word. Not with strength. With stillness. The stallion halted mid-lunge, dust erupting around him. He snorted, stomped, paced 2 furious circles around her. Then stood. He didn't leave. He didn't strike. He watched. And so did everyone else. The announcer, mouth open, forgot his next line. The boy from before stared, eyes wide, popcorn tumbling from his hand. June rose slowly. Her hands stayed down. she whispered. Not words, just breath. A rhythm. A tune no one else could hear. The stallion stepped forward. Just one step. Then two. He didn't bow. He didn't offer surrender. But something passed between them. A moment, a memory, a mirror. She saw what others didn't. Not rage. Not curse. Just a creature too proud to kneel and too hurt to trust. She knew that look. Wore it every time she passed a window. When she reached the fence again, the crowd split like oil on water. Some clapped. Some cursed. Most just stared. The ranch owner, a stout man with a stitched-up lip and a crooked hat, stepped forward. "You want the ride?" he asked. She shook her head. "Then why'd you walk in?" June met his eyes. To see if he was still listening. He frowned. To what? But she didn't answer. That night, she stayed by the pen. Didn't ask for a trailer. Didn't want a room. Just sat under the moon, legs crossed, humming that same tune into the dry air while coyotes howled in the distance. The stallion stood at the far end of the pen. Watching. Not approaching. Not turning away either. A stable hand approached with a blanket. "You ridin' him tomorrow?" June looked up. Her eyes were tired, but not weak. "I'm not here to win," she said. "I'm here to remember." He left her alone after that. In the hours before dawn, wind tugged at her sleeves. The stars wheeled over the desert. And somewhere deep inside the stallion's chest, something loosened. Just a little. Not enough to trust, but enough to listen. By morning, the word had spread. The woman with no rope had stood her ground. The ranch owner announced the challenge again. 1 million. 5 miles. No saddle. The stallion snorted fire, already coiled with fury. And June stepped forward again. She didn't look back. Didn't need to. She already knew no one believed she'd survive it. But then again, no one else had ever whispered to the wind and had it listen back. The morning air settled heavy with heat, the kind that seeped into your bones before the sun ever touched your skin. Wind whispered low across the dust, kicking up memories older than any man in the crowd, stirring ghosts from the scrubgrass. Folks showed up early that day, not just the ranch hands or the gamblers, but families, old-timers, ranch wives with biscuits and wax paper, and even a preacher or two. Word had gotten out. The woman hadn't run. They still didn't know her name. Just that she'd walked into a storm and walked back out without blinking. June sat on the corral rail, hands clasped in front of her, fingers blackened with old leather and new dust. She hadn't slept, not really. The kind of sleep she'd had was the kind that hovered between breath and prayer, where every dream sounded like a hoofbeat and smelled like salt and cedar. The stallion was awake too. Always had been, she guessed. He moved like smoke over fire, slow and restless, stopping every so often to stomp or shake out a memory. There was no fence in the world that could hold him, only the illusion of one. That he stayed inside was his own choice. That he didn't destroy everything near him was a decision he reevaluated every second. June understood that. The ranch owner gave her a once-over when he arrived, a rolled cigarette half-chewed at the corner of his mouth. "You sure about this?" "I'm already here," she said. "That don't mean you have to ride him." "No," she said, brushing dust off her jeans, "but it means I will." He snorted. "You know what $1 million would buy you?" June looked out toward the horizon, where the land peeled away into blue-gray silence. "Maybe," she said, "but it can't buy what I'm trying to remember." That was the part no one grasped. This wasn't about breaking a horse. It wasn't about winning. It was about something older, something that had died a long time ago and kept dying every time she ignored it. They brought out the paperwork, liability forms, disclaimers, waivers. June signed with a quick flick of her wrist. No hesitation. The pen trembled slightly in her grip, but no one saw. She left the signature box blank where it asked for an emergency contact. That line had been blank for years. Across the arena, the stallion pawed at the dirt, then flung his head so hard the sun caught the sweat on his neck like it had caught tears once upon a time. "He don't know kindness," one of the wranglers muttered. No, June said without looking. He just don't recognize it anymore. A boy from the crowd came up to her with wide, uncertain eyes. Couldn't have been more than 10. He held out a piece of bread from a lunch bag. For the horse, he said. June took it gently. Thank you. You're not scared. I am. Then why you doing it? She smiled, the kind that faded as quickly as it came. Because fear ain't the worst thing you can carry. Regret is heavier. She walked toward the pen again, slow as sunrise. The world hushed. The announcer lowered his microphone. No speeches this time. The stallion watched her. Not with the wild fury of before, but with something measured. Something searching. He knew her now. Or at least, he knew she wasn't like the others. That counted for something. She stepped inside. No bridle. No rope. No boots on stirrups. No fanfare. Just breath. She stopped just inside the boundary, the place where dust turned to tension. That place in every life where a line gets drawn, between what was and what must be. The stallion didn't move. She broke the bread the boy had given her. Crumbled it in her palm. Let the scent drift. Still, he didn't move. So she hummed. Soft. Low. A tune without words, older than even the land. She didn't remember where she'd learned it. Only that her father used to whistle it as he brushed down the mare they'd owned before Lark. Before the accident. Before the silence settled in their home like smoke from a fire that had never fully burned out. The stallion took a step. June exhaled. He took another. The corral fell so quiet you could hear the flags flap against the broken poles. Another step. Then he stopped, snorted once, and turned his head, just a little. A question, maybe. Or a dare. She stepped closer in answer. They stood a breath apart now. She didn't reach for him. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, my father's name was Cole. He raised me on land so dry we used to joke that even the shadows ran thirsty. The stallion flicked his ear. He had a horse named Lark, she continued. Fast. Gentle. Trusted him like breath. Until the one day she didn't. She bucked. He fell. And the world split open. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. I was there. I saw it. The blood. The silence. And I never touched another horse again. Her fingers trembled at her side. She made no move to hide it. I thought if I forgot, it'd stop hurting. But forgetting's just a slow way to die. The stallion took another step. Closer now. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the quiver in his muscles, the breath against her shirt. He lowered his head. June closed her eyes. Not in fear, but in grief. And when she opened them again, she raised her hand. Not to grab, not to control, but to rest. Gently. Just above his chest, near where the pulse beat against skin like a memory refusing to fade. He didn't pull back. She let her hand fall away, stepped back, and nodded once. The moment was over. She walked back to the gate, shoulders stiff, breath steady. Every eye was on her. Every mouth open. She ain't rode him yet, someone whispered. But she touched him, said someone else. The ranch owner met her at the gate. You just gonna walk away again? She looked down at her hand, where sweat had turned to dirt in the shape of a heartbeat. I didn't come here to ride, she said. I came to ask if he still remembered how to listen. And her eyes flicked toward the corral. The stallion hadn't moved, but something in the air had. He does, she said. The owner crossed his arms. So what now? June looked at the horizon again, not for an answer, but for a beginning. I'll try tomorrow, she said. Then she walked off, boots stirring up dust that would take a long time to settle. That night, the stallion stood near the fence where she'd once sat. Not close. Not trusting. But closer than before. And June, sleeping just 20 yards away, dreamed not of screams or broken spines, but of Lark alive again, running beneath a sky that hadn't known sadness yet. The Kappa Sigma kill dome, orbiting the dead moon of Virex 4, was sold out for the first time in 3 solar cycles. 37 species had gathered to witness what the Galactic Empire gleefully advertised as the tactical humiliation of humanity. Exhibit G. From crystalline Darashai to slug-like Ograthi warlords smeared in ceremonial mucus, they all filled the tiers, buzzing, clicking, or humming in expectation. The Terrans, it was widely accepted, were a galactic footnote with delusions of competence. Their tactics, archaic. Their technology, analog. Their soldiers, emotional, erratic, and obsessed with projectile-based weapons as if energy coils hadn't been invented millennia ago. The pre-show commentators, 3 tentacled ex-generals turned broadcasters, chuckled through translation nodes. "Observe, dear viewers," one purred, gesturing with a proboscis toward a holographic schematic of the arena. "The Terran sniper. A solitary combatant. Stationary. Limited field of vision. Truly, their species romanticizes futility." The other added, "They even bring rifles to a grav combat zone. No adaptive exogel, no autonomous drones. Just scopes and bullets. How adorably prehistoric." In a high, dimmed catwalk above the arena floor, Sergeant Kat O'Leary blinked twice through her visor, engaging her lens recalibration. Her breath made a small puff inside the mask. Calm, steady. The rifle in her hands, a modified L115A3, lay balanced across a friction clamp. It looked almost laughably out of place in the space-age temple to overcomplication. Matte black metal and tempered Canadian wood stock, no plasma chamber, no AI assist. She lay prone, a human shadow in the steel shadows, limbs arranged with clinical precision. Her body language suggested ease, but her heartbeat was a metronome. Her mind wasn't on the commentators or the jabs at human warfare. It was on the 2.1-kilometer shot she was about to take through a constantly shifting environment laced with refractive energy pulses and atmospheric fluctuations designed specifically to thwart line-of-sight targeting. To be fair, the arena designers hadn't considered a human would try to line up a ballistic shot through it. That was the mistake. "Kat, you copy?" came a voice in her ear. Calm, warm, and French-Canadian, Corporal Mukendi's accent colored the words like music behind static. "Copy," she replied. "Do they know I'm here yet? Does a moose know it's about to meet a train?" Kat allowed herself a small grin. "Status. Command says wait. The feed's going live to 87 systems. They want to maximize theatrical payoff." "Wonderful," she said dryly. "Let me know when it's time to punch the galaxy in the teeth." Below, the Imperials filed in. Their entrance was a symphony of arrogance. A battalion of Tharnal shock troopers marched in symmetrical diamond formation, banners high. Behind them floated the Imperial Marshal himself, Glorem Vask, his armory-adorned hover platform radiating gold and polished bone. He waved to the audience, claws spread, and bared his fangs in what his species considered a smile but what most others mistook for a death threat. He raised a gauntlet hand and barked through Vox-augmented projection. "Let this be a demonstration of what discipline, unity, and genetic superiority yield over chaos and improvisation. The human is somewhere in this arena. Alone. Fragile. Armed with only powder and pride. We—" The shot interrupted him mid-sentence. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing. A puff of silver mist in the far corner. A flicker. A pause. And then, one heartbeat later, Vask's platform pitched violently, the banner-bearer to his left exploding in a mist of cerulean blood and carbonized regalia. The pole split in two. Half embedded itself in the floor. The other spiraled into the crowd. A full 3 seconds passed before the crowd realized it wasn't part of the show. Screams. Movement. Frantic buzzing. The camera feed stuttered. Kat exhaled slowly. "Nice," Mukendi said, his voice tight. "Arena control just went offline. They're locking it down." "Expected," she said, rolling sideways into the darkness, detaching the clamp. Her boots magnetized just enough for traction. "How's my cover?" "You've got about 30 seconds before they triangulate trajectory." I'll only need 20. The catwalk was beginning to glow, their version of a localized heat scan, a desperate attempt to flush her out. She moved faster, slinging the rifle behind her, using wall anchors to zip-line laterally across the interior ribs of the dome. Graceful, silent. Like she'd done this in Barnes back home. Only difference was, Barnes didn't have rotating gravity wells or anti-personnel drones crawling up the walls. She hit a dark alcove near the upper reactor vent and flattened herself. Her HUD blinked once. New orders. Engage secondary target. Weapon testbed en route. Confirm when eyes on. Kat tapped the side of her helmet twice to confirm, then narrowed her eyes. Below, the chaos settled into angry motion. Vask was still alive, shouting commands in shrill tones. The arena shield slammed down, opaque, shimmering walls of refractive plasma to trap the shooter inside. But what the Imperials didn't understand was simple. Kat wasn't trapped in the arena. The arena was trapped with her. She reached into her pouch and retrieved a small metal cylinder about the size of a thumb. Flicked the cap open. Inside was a familiar wax paper-wrapped item. She took a bite, jerky, caribou seasoned, home-dried. Chewed slowly while adjusting her position. Kat, Mukendi said again. Secondary asset incoming. Confirmed 4 drones, 1 mech suit, guided by neural net. They think you're a bug. She smirked. Time to be the windshield. The drone formation entered from above, humming like angry wasps, each with an anti-ballistic shield and laser tether. The mech came stomping in after 12 feet of bipedal steel arrogance, calibrated to react faster than a human could blink. It scanned constantly. Kat sighted through the scope. And waited. Beneath her, the floor panel shimmered. One of the drones pinged her position. Almost. Close, but not enough. She held her breath. Lined up her shot. She aimed not at the drone, but at the reflective paneling on the far arena wall. Fired. The bullet bounced off the polished duraluminum, arcing like a billiard ball. It split one drone clean in half, then pinged off another shield to land squarely in the mech's optics pod. Sparks flew. It convulsed once. Then slumped forward like a marionette with cut strings. The remaining drones scattered, unsure. She used that moment to drop again, rappelling down the interior panel toward the announcer's booth. They're recalibrating, Mukendi warned. I know. They're angry. I really know. Inside the booth, the commentators had gone pale, or whatever their species' version of pale was. One had retracted into its own exoskeletal casing. The other nervously flailed 2 tentacles at the camera feed. We now understand the human is employing, ballistic reflection tactics. A primitive but evidently effectual strategy. Kat opened the booth door with one boot. They froze. She gestured with her rifle. Keep the feed live. The galaxy deserves front-row seats. And you will not destroy us? She tilted her head. Why would I do that? I'm Canadian. The feed stayed up. Down below, Vask was breathing hard, scanning the rooftops like a paranoid god. The surviving Imperials had fanned out, energy weapons drawn, backed by riot drones. And yet the audience had gone silent. All across the Empire, viewers leaned in toward screens, enthralled by something they had not expected to feel in a demonstration against Earth. Doubt. Kat made one last adjustment to her rifle. The next shot was meant for something more symbolic. She found the Empire's banner mounted above the control dais. 1 round. She fired. The banner peeled from its hooks, fluttering like a dying flame. The crowd didn't roar. It held its breath. She tapped her comms. Mukendi. Yeah. We're done here. You sure? Positive. Exit plan. She smiled. Make them think I never existed. He chuckled. Like a ghost. No, she said. Like a whisper in the woods. As she disappeared into the walls of the arena, the feed stayed on just long enough to catch Marshal Vask's expression. For the first time in his decorated career, it wasn't contempt. It was confusion. And then, something that looked eerily like fear. They called it a debriefing, but it felt more like theater. The Lunar Forward Operations Mess, a tin can outpost glued to the dusty belly of Earth's moon, hummed with quiet tension. Screens flickered with static as bureaucrats, analysts, and generals milled about, pretending not to glance at the sniper in the corner nursing a steaming mug. Sergeant Kat O'Leary sat with her back to the wall, one boot braced against a crate of rebreather filters, her rifle disassembled beside her like an artist's brushes after a gallery showing. She wasn't talking. Not because she didn't have anything to say, she had plenty, but because everyone else was too busy arguing in acronyms. "You're telling me she brought down a mech unit with a .338 Lapua?" barked a bald Earthfleet colonel whose collar stars gleamed like an apology for competence. "No," corrected Mukendi, calm as lake ice. "She brought it down with geometry." There was a pause. "Is that sarcasm?" Mukendi didn't blink. "It's trigonometry. Slightly ruder cousin." Kat stifled a smile behind her cup. The coffee was terrible. Burnt, recycled, sludgy. But it was hot, and it reminded her of early mornings in Moosejaw, back when her greatest adversary had been her father's stubborn old Ford that wouldn't start at -40. The arguments continued. Imperial propaganda was reacting fast, already spinning her appearance in the Kill Dome as a stunt. Their latest holovid featured an exaggerated animation of a human woman firing a slingshot from behind a maple tree. The Empire's mocking slogan, primitive precision, galactic delusion. But somewhere beneath the bluster, cracks had formed. Because for the first time in a very long time, an Imperial battle unit had been publicly embarrassed. Not just defeated, undone. By one woman with a bolt-action rifle and an impossible shot. The Empire had to respond. And so did Earth. Orders came fast. An old mining operation on Ganymede, Ice Mine 72A, had gone dark. Satellites picked up strange heat signatures, and whispers on the encrypted channels suggested the Imperials were testing new adaptive AI drones deep in the tunnels. If they succeeded in applying AI learning to subterranean combat, the balance would tilt. Earth needed eyes on the ground. And a very specific kind of shooter above it. Kat didn't argue when the orders were handed over. She just finished her coffee, packed her rifle in a weatherproof sling, and walked toward the hangar with Mukendi at her side. Ganymede was cold in a way the moon never managed. Wet, hungry cold. The kind that crept under seals and tried to make itself a roommate in your bones. Their transport landed in silence beneath a swirl of frost storms. The mine's upper levels had been abandoned years ago when Earth's budget collapsed during the Mars recession. Now it was a ghost burrow. They made their way down in silence, boots crunching through frost-laced debris. The tunnels still bore the gouge marks of ice harvesters and the grease stains of forgotten drills. But what unsettled Kat were the new footprints. Not human. Not even uniform. They were rounded, clawed, three-pointed, scout drones, perhaps, but they moved erratically. Searching. Mukendi activated a soft pulse beacon behind them. No comms down here. No GPS. They were going dark by necessity. Kat found the perfect spot 40 meters above the main shaft, a fissure that opened into an ancient vent tunnel, overlooking a basin of reflective ice. With a bit of math and a lot of nerve, she could use the natural geometry to create a bouncing corridor of death. She began planting micro-reflectors, coin-sized discs with a thermal shimmer. The plan was simple. Or rather, it would look simple when it worked. The reflectors would confuse AI pattern recognition and create a ghost image of the terrain. Then Kat could aim for the real targets while the drones chased phantoms. She adjusted one reflector carefully, exhaled fog, and whispered, "Don't miss, don't mess, don't get caught." The same mantra she always said when going into the wild. Her grandfather had taught it to her before her first moose hunt. Back then, she had carried a rifle almost as long as she was tall and had cried for 3 hours after pulling the trigger. Now, she only cried after. Hours passed. The light shifted blue, then green as Ganymede's faint auroras flickered through the cracks in the dome above. Then came the hum. 4 drones emerged, sleek and predatory, wings folded in like knives. They skimmed low, silent, their sensors twitching. Behind them came the prototype, an 8-legged mech, spider-like and eerily graceful, trailing cords of pulsing blue neural net. Its optics shimmered like soap bubbles. This was no ordinary warbot. This was a learner. Kat lay still, body melded into the ice and shadow. She adjusted her scope by 3 microns. Not at the target. At the second reflector. She fired. The bullet ricocheted once, twice, 3 times. Ping, ping, silence, and hit the drone's power coil dead center. It convulsed mid-air and exploded. The remaining drones scattered, confused by the lack of heat signature and trajectory. The mech hesitated. That was new. A pause. A flicker of doubt in its motion. It turned slowly toward the sound, scanning the reflectors. Kat didn't shoot again. She waited. The mech twitched, spun, fired blindly into the ice. A chunk of wall collapsed in a rush of frozen vapor. One drone followed, its sensors chasing echoes. Mukendi's voice crackled through the emergency line. Something's wrong. That bot, it's learning. I think it's rewriting its rules. Kat narrowed her eyes. Then I need to teach it a better one. She adjusted the scope, calculated a 4th-angle shot, almost absurd. She aimed for a glinting screw on a pipe overhead. Pulled the trigger. The bullet ricocheted through 2 reflectors, bounced off the pipe, and struck the mech's stabilizer joint. It lurched sideways, stumbled into its own drone, and collapsed in a heap of tangled limbs and shattered optics. Silence fell. Then steam. Kat waited 5 more minutes, watching through her scope as the bot twitched once, then powered down. Finally, she rose, joints stiff. She retrieved 2 of her reflectors and packed up the rest. On the surface, night had deepened. The stars above Ganymede looked closer somehow, like watchful eyes. She and Mukendi stood in the snow beside the evac transport. You could have just shot it in the face, he said. And let it think humans are predictable? She raised an eyebrow. Nah. Let it fear math. They climbed into the transport. Any regrets? He asked. She shook her head. Just one. I forgot to save a piece of jerky. The transport lifted. On the moon's edge, long-range sensors picked up the flicker of an orbital energy beam passing through nearby space. A warning shot. The Imperials had seen the footage. Back in Earth's orbit, encrypted channels lit up. Imperial High Command, faced with the growing rumor of a ghost sniper disrupting their plans, issued a new order to all field units. Code Moose. Engage with extreme caution. Do not underestimate human ballistic tactics. Avoid reflective environments. Terminate with orbital precision. Kat read the decoded intercept an hour later, floating in the low-grav galley of the carrier ship Resolute Wind. She read it twice. Then, slowly, with practiced grace, she removed a folded scrap of notebook paper from her chest pocket. Written in faded ink. You do not need to roar to be dangerous. You only need to be still when others cannot. Grandfather. She folded it again. Slid it back into her suit. Outside, the stars wheeled, patient and slow. War was coming. But in this brief, frozen hour between battles, all was still. And so was she. The command center aboard the Resolute Wind was dimly lit, bathed in the slow pulse of red and blue emergency filters. From its panoramic viewport, Europa glistened in the distance like a blue-white marble suspended in velvet. Beneath its icy shell, 100 hidden currents stirred, and above it, a storm was coming. "Show me the refractor sweep again," Kat O'Leary said, arms folded across her chest as she stared at the holomap. Thin lines of simulated light danced between orbiting satellites and the planet's surface, refracting through meticulously placed artificial prisms and crystal beacons launched into geosync earlier that morning. Lieutenant Zhao, the mission systems tech, adjusted the display. Each node is timed to cascade photons along a false vector path. When the Imperials scan, they'll see 10 fleet signatures, but only 3 are real. We use the ice's natural reflective properties to exaggerate the noise. And when they fire on the false ones, Mukendi added from beside her, we slide in underneath their line of sight. Kat nodded. She had no love for space combat. Too sterile, too chaotic. But this piece of it, made sense. You couldn't outmuscle the Empire, not head-on. But you could make them doubt their own vision. In her grandfather's words, "A bear won't chase what it can't smell." Operation Northern Lights wasn't just a mission, it was a message. After Ganymede, the Empire began adjusting. Drones reprogrammed. Protocols rewritten. High Command authorized a no-warning strike policy against known human snipers. Entire cities were blacklisted as probable havens. And Kat's name, though never spoken, was passed like a ghost story among the Imperial ranks. Now, the goal was escalation. Not to win. Not yet. Just to remind them that humans were more than the sum of their tech. They were something the Empire could not calculate. Kat walked alone to the armory. Her rifle, cleaned and reassembled, lay inside its pressure-sealed container like an artifact. She opened the case slowly. The carbon-black barrel reflected the overhead fluorescence in a dull gleam. She pulled on her EVA suit. The helmet clicked, sealing around her face. Her breath hissed once. A whisper of earth clung to her gloves, an old scratch where she'd once carved her initials into a tree with a broken compass. "Time for the dance," she murmured. The launch tube hummed, artificial gravity pulsing down. She stepped into the pod, slung the rifle over her back, and gripped the side rails. Mukendi's voice came through the comm. "Try not to do anything cinematic this time." "No promises," she replied. The pod launched. Silent, brutal acceleration. Kat's vision narrowed as Europa rose before her, vast and flickering. Dozens of refraction nodes hovered in orbit like a constellation forged by liars. Each one a decoy. Each one a misdirection. She reached the mission anchor, an ice shard the size of a city bus, slowly spinning in Europa's upper exosphere. A grappling line fired from her wrist. It latched with a thunk. Kat reeled herself in and flattened along the surface. The temperature dropped to extremes that would kill any unprotected flesh instantly. She blinked through her HUD, switching to tactical overlay. Below, the Imperial flagship Valor Ascendant crept into view, bristling with weapons and ego. She ran her gloved fingers along the icy surface, placing stabilization pods like breadcrumbs. When the time came, she'd lie flat, completely still, and let orbital momentum carry her into position. "Kat," Mukendi said in her ear, "we're in range." "They're scanning. Hooking on the first ghost." "Time to lie," she answered. And the light show began. From her vantage, it was breathtaking, like the aurora borealis had come unhinged from Earth and taken up residence in space. Streams of laser-mapped signal light twisted, refracted, split into blooming false positive signatures across the sky. The Empire's long-range sensors caught fire with confusion. Warning lights blinked red across their decks. Defensive systems overcompensated. They fired on nothing. 3 capital-grade plasma bursts roared into phantom targets. One dissipated harmlessly through frozen vapor. Another bounced against a prism and turned into fireworks. The third missed entirely, chasing a heat ghost trailing from a decoy beacon. In the midst of their chaos, the real human fleet moved, low, fast, quiet. But Kat didn't watch them. She watched only one thing: the flagship sensor tower. 15 meters tall. Reinforced. Shielded against basic assault. But not against a long-range kinetic impact to its gyroscopic stabilizer. She flattened herself across the ice, cradled the rifle into its harness, and calculated windlass drag, orbital arc, and prism deflection. Even with all her adjustments, she would only have one shot. Not a kill. A lesson. "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take," she whispered, half smiling under her breath. She squeezed the trigger. The shot soared like a prayer. No explosion. Just impact. The stabilizer core cracked with a sharp pulse. The entire sensor array shifted 2 degrees to the left. Imperceptible to most. But to Kat, it meant everything. The flagship staggered. Its targeting computer sent conflicting signals. Its AI threw up a soft error code: visual input does not match navigational charting. Weapons stuttered. Tracking faltered. That was all the invitation the Terran fleet needed. Corvettes came screaming in, slicing through the blind spot. Missiles sang. EMP pulses bloomed. The Valor Ascendant buckled under the first wave, plasma turrets falling dark as its main engines flared defensively. Inside, chaos bloomed. But even as she watched, Kat hesitated. The blast range from one of the corvettes had hit the civilian maintenance ring orbiting Europa, a transport corridor for miners and scientists. It wasn't destroyed, but one of the tethers had broken loose. Now a habitat module was drifting toward the ice, fast and tumbling. "Mukendi," she snapped, "the ring's going to impact. We can't reroute from here. Tractor locks are tied to the capital." "I'll handle it, Kat." But she was already up, legs magnetized, ice slipping beneath her. She recalibrated the rifle mid-run, ejecting the round she had loaded for the sensor tower. Switched to a subsonic uranium-tipped round. Meant not for warheads, but for physics. She dropped to one knee, took a deep breath, fired. The bullet hit the detachment joint of the tether mid-spin. It sheared clean. The module spun, slowed, and corrected trajectory as internal compensators realigned. People inside would live. The war continued overhead, but Kat just closed her eyes and breathed. She wasn't here for glory. She wasn't here for blood. She was here to prove that humans still chose precision over power. "Nice shot," Mukendi said after a long silence. "One day you'll have to teach me that trick." "One day I might miss," she replied. "Not in this lifetime." The battle wound down as Imperial ships limped from orbit, humiliated again. Terran forces withdrew. No pursuit followed. The Empire had lost face. Again. Back aboard the Resolute Wind, the crew greeted her with nods, not cheers. That was how they worked. A silent reverence. She passed the command deck on her way to debrief. General Rourke stopped her briefly. "You disobeyed orders. Broke engagement to protect civilians." "I saw a problem. I solved it." Rourke gave a thin smile. "The galaxy's watching." "Good," she said. "Let them learn something." Alone in her quarters, Kat stripped out of her suit. Her fingers trembled. Cold, exhaustion, memory. She sat on the edge of her bunk, ran a cloth over the rifle, then leaned back and stared at the porthole window. Europa still spun out there, quiet and glistening. The aurora lingered. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment. Outside, in some Imperial war room on a distant moon, a senior tactician reviewed the combat footage in silence. Paused it on the moment the sensor tower shifted. Rewound. Played again. He frowned. There was no visible cause. No plasma burst. No energy trace. Just a flicker in the footage. A dark spot, maybe. He tagged the file, "Unknown Anomaly, Ballistics?" And beneath that, in smaller font, another word added in curiosity and quiet dread. Human. The war would continue. But somewhere deep within the gears of the Empire, a thought had begun to form. They weren't fighting machines. They were fighting a myth.